What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. We're diving into our second wide receiver from Steve Smith Sr.'s top 10 list. We're talking about Arizona wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan today, and I've been waiting to dive into him and get my hands on an idea of what he really is, right? I've seen titles thrown out like unicorn. Obviously, he's had that number one wide receiver allure since returning back for his senior year. And I came away impressed, still with some concerns, right? I think ultimately I'm still a little bit confused about what he is, because there's certain elements of what he does that shouldn't necessarily be possible for someone his size and stature. But then there's also things that you would expect that somebody does at an elite level based off his size and stature, and that just doesn't really come to the forefront. So at 6'4", 219 pounds, this is Arizona's former four-star recruit. He was the top five, at least one of the top five wide receivers nationally, and he's Arizona's highest ranked signee in program history. So obviously there was a lot of expectations coming around Ted and what he was going to be able to bring to that program. And I think he fulfilled on a lot of that, if not all of it, from Jump Street, right? He's intriguing because he was used all across the formation. So I think a lot of people view him as kind of that big Z, or I guess power slot type receiver mold, but he did work out of the X, Z, and slot position. So he has that versatility where you can throw him around the formation and you can try to figure out what's going to be the best mismatch opportunity if you aren't just playing straight up, one versus ones, two versus twos. With that said, elite red zone player. He's been scoring touchdowns at a ridiculous rate since he stepped out on the field his rookie year, or at least his, rookie year, right? Consistent leader from day one is one of the things that really impressed me. When you have someone that has a ton of expectations out of the gate, you have someone that isn't walking into, I guess, an established program, right? Or at least one that's been consistently dominant like that. It could be tough, right? You could have a range of results, but with him, things were always pretty consistent. He led all first-year players in receiving his first year in. He led the team in receiving stats his sophomore year. You talk about 2023 being what many people think is the best tape that they've seen from him, and that's mostly due to 2024. There was an ankle injury prior to the year that many people think lingered throughout that entire time, and we feel like we haven't seen 100% out of him, which is a scary thought since he pretty much had similar numbers that he put up in 2023. And then you talk about him being a Biletnikoff finalist, his senior year, ending things out by being the all-time leader in receiving yards for that program as well, actually beating out his wide receiver coach who formerly had the record. So he's impressed at every stop, at every potential opportunity. I feel like he's capitalized. So it almost feels like a little bit of a slap in the face to say that he's not at the same caliber of what you've seen from the wide receiver class last year when you look at guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze that came out. So for these big wide receiver types, I think people still would put him comfortably behind quite a few guys from last year. But in his own right, this year, even in addition to comparisons from last year, I think there's a lot that you can say that he has a one-up on in certain aspects. But you see on tape the former volleyball and backgrounds that he has, the explosiveness when it comes to his leaping ability, his ability to go out there and box guys out and really kind of maximize not only his catch radius, but the leverage that he gets on these routes and how he's going about making some of these cuts and breaks during his route running. One of the intriguing things as we talk about this here going forward, Go balls and hitches. These were about 40% of his career routes during his time at Arizona, meaning everything else is what essentially made up the majority of his production, right? This isn't a guy that's overly quick or overly fast. He made himself some money back by posting, I believe it was a 4.48 40-yard dash at his pro day. But overall, this isn't a guy that you expect to be catching 60-yard bombs down the field consistently and things like that. He can definitely still make plays in the deep parts of the field, but it's not going to be as a burner. This is going to be a long, drawn-out play where he just happened to have gotten down there, the ball got chucked up, and he's coming down with it. Has only been at the one university, which is always a plus to me. Again, the less schools, the better. I do understand the transfer portal and the need for guys to try to maximize their situations on any given yearly basis. But I do love somebody that sticks with one school because you can see if there's a lack of development or if there is development, what has the progress looked like? Where are the substantial gains or losses being made? So this is a huge plus to me. He's capping off his 2024 year with 84 catches, 1,319 yards, and 8 touchdowns to go with that after hitting double-digit touchdowns in 2023 and a little over 1,400 yards. So this is a volume wide receiver. This is a guy that can be looked at as that consistent go-to option. You're talking 10-plus targets a game, and he has the ability to go insane. In fact, I told you guys about the ankle injury that many people thought was limiting him throughout the entirety of his 2024 season. To cap things off, or to kick things off, I guess is the better way to put it here, New Mexico was the game they started their season on, and he went insane, absolutely nuclear. 10 catches for over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. If that lets you know anything other than the fact that he can completely dominate a game by himself, I don't know what's a better calling card for somebody like that. There's very few people who have that stat line, regardless of small school, big school, SEC, Big Ten, etc., etc. So when you look at some of the comparisons, it makes sense for the type of impact player he can be. Drake London, T. Higgins, Rome Odunze, George Pickens is some of the top ones that you'll see. I do think a lot of this is just a little bit of a lazy-ish type comparison. Again, this guy is a unicorn in the sense of how he utilizes his athleticism and his size. But overall, I don't think there's necessarily an apples-to-apples match in terms of game film per se. But all in all, I think you walk away with, at the very least, looking at him as your kind of T. Higgins, George Pickens-ish type player. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't believe he has wide receiver 1 potential. I definitely think it's there. But this is a guy that's going to have to be even further technically refined in what he's been able to put out there so far. But some of the things that I really, really enjoyed about checking him out, he has an innate feel for working back to the quarterback for easier reads. When you talk about plays breaking down, when you talk about scramble drills, this becomes your best friend. Not necessarily a tight end, or he can work as an extended version of a tight end for you with the size that he brings. But overall, he has just an uncanny ability to make sure that his quarterback always has some kind of option and they don't just have to dust the ball to the sidelines or force a throw as opposed to having a little bit more of an easier completion, right? He understands when to hand fight during running some of these routes that are going to be a little bit more extended. I'm thinking things off of play action, for example, or on the occasions where they did have him running some of those go or hitch routes. And he does it without drawing flags, right? And in fact, more often than not, you're going to see the defender kind of fighting for his life and either looking for the flag or he's going to make an error as he's trying to figure out how to adjust to this big body, long arm player that's kind of matching some of that physicality throughout the route stem. He feels where open spaces are pretty easily. The 60% that wasn't go and hitch routes for him were things underneath, or as him being able to work out of the slot, or as that Z type receiver for them. Top tier focus near the boundary. This is a guy that I would say at least 90+% of the time, it felt like if he was catching a ball near the sideline, he was guaranteed to get a foot inbounds and he was going to pull off some kind of ridiculous catch utilizing his body control. And that's exactly what you want. It's one of the things that I've been asking for within this offense for a long, long time. It's what drew me to somebody like Drake London as opposed to Garrett Wilson when we're looking at that draft class and who should be the preferred option, assuming everybody would be available for the Jets at their pick. Best routes come on things like whip routes, crossers, in cuts, things where he can kind of work, again, a lot of these underneath routes, he can work across the field. Some of these breaks and leverage opportunities he takes when it comes to how he tries to create some of that separation is purely based on the length that he has and the catch radius that he's aware of. So for situations where he's operating as a power slot, for example, or he's flanking, you'll see a lot of what's happening is, for one, the defender is already kind of on their heels and apprehensive because there's a size disadvantage here. And then you combine that with the fact that he's kind of breaking off some of these routes at 45, 90-ish degree angles, so he's not necessarily flatlining these things. It just creates a lot more variability, a lot more variance, there we go, in terms of what the defender has to execute perfectly on in order to just have a shot at defending him against these kind of routes. Yak isn't his calling card, but what I will say is he does an excellent job of breaking off the kind of tackles he should. A lot of those arm tackles, a lot of guys that aren't coming in fundamentally sound. One of the more impressive things in terms of some of those developmental jumps comes in this area. He had 14 missed tackles before his 2024 season. Coming off of this year, he was able to double that with 29 forced missed tackles in 2024. So I don't think this will ever be a significant part of his game in the NFL ranks. Since it wasn't necessarily one in college, I think he hovered around, 500 plus ish yards of his 13 to 1400 on average the last 2 years, relating to yak ability. So it is what it is, but it's a little nuanced game where you may see, a breakout game here or there in the NFL just based off guys coming at him at the wrong angles and kind of making shoestring type tackles, things like that he could shrug off. We talked about the elite body control as it pertains to his ability to win on the boundary. He's also a very fluid route runner, and this is where some of that unicorn-ish stuff comes into play. When you look at him, you should think guys like Mike Evans. You should think guys like T. Higgins that are always physical or always ferocious in kind of how they're going about running their routes. This guy's more of kind of like a gazelle or something. It's not a lot of tempo. It's not a lot of necessary heavy start-stop ability. Is smooth route running, generally what feels like at one consistent speed. And I think it catches people off for those that want to or tend to imagine that they need to defend guys that are going to be explosive, trying to come out of routes and doing, stringing together multiple moves and head fakes and different things like that. And that's not his game. He wants to go out there, hit his landmarks, and do it at a tempo that I think catches guys off guard when it realistically shouldn't, right? Elite on back shoulder throws, not only in the red zone, but just in general. This is going to be his money-making catch. And for his size, he pulls it off more often than not. I know he was able to bump up his catch and traffic radius, for example, or his contested catch rate. He was hovering around 50-ish% for his career, but I believe he bumped that mark up to about 61% his final year here. And then finally, iron clamps for hands. When the ball is secured by him, it's not getting punched out. This is if you're a DB facing him and you're thinking, I can't make this tackle, the best bet is to try to get in his way and then punch this ball out. It's not going to happen. He's going to kind of drag you for a couple extra yards, and it's going to be what it is at that point for you. So one of the things I definitely love, I hate somebody that gets really loosey-goosey with the ball once they catch it. You see a lot of that with Garrett Wilson, for example, and even at times guys like Breece Hall, et cetera, right? But nonetheless, Areas of opportunity for him: physicality and speed inconsistencies. This is a guy that you expect to dominate off the line of scrimmage, and more often than not, you see guys being able to cut off the timing when it comes to some of those timing routes. You see guys being able to stall him out closer to the line of scrimmage more often than you would expect to. And then overall, we talked about it when it comes to the 40-yard dash, all that good stuff. He's never going to be a burner. That's not the way he wins his game, but it's also kind of a plus in the same token because he's worked to be more technically refined in how he wants to attack defenders when it comes to setting up these routes. But if he can figure out a way to develop some stronger counters, some stronger releases off the line of scrimmage, or even just gaining the strength to be able to compete and not knock his timing off as much, you're talking about an even better opportunity for him to win a lot of these routes that end up being more contested than they should be. He also only shows when it comes to some of these deeper routes, and this goes into film work and stuff, but when you can see a DB keys in on the fact that he may be running a go route or a hitch, he really only has like one vertical release, package, I guess, right? Which isn't really a package. It's one particular move that he does repetitively. He's going to find a way to need to be able to mix and match that up. Kind of already touched on this, but creates more contested catch situations than necessary for his guy, his size, when he's not perfectly breaking off or creating some of those dynamic routes where he is breaking things off at a particular angle. He does allow guys to stay in phase to try to make a play on the ball more often than not, but a lot of that is coming when he's running some of those underneath routes, and again, a lot of that stuff coming on those hitch and go routes where guys are going to be able to stay in phase with him the entirety of the time, unless there's a slip or some kind of false misstep or something. But it's easy for guys to recover on some of those more long-winded plays that develop, and he's being looked at as either security blanket or the primary target, just hoping to take a shot or force a flag. He doesn't have a good sense for tempo or urgency in his routes, and again, some of this based on the fact that he understands he doesn't have speed, maybe just how he figures he needs to win. But there's definitely times on film where you can look and see that if he would have, pressed the gas a little bit more here, he's talking about having a pretty easy 2-4 yard open window for his quarterback to throw into. He can get beat pretty often, as talked about at the line of scrimmage versus press, and this isn't even a size thing. You can see some smaller corners that match up with him get the best of him at the line of scrimmage before he figures out a way to win once he finally can get 2 or 3 yards down the field. You see him telegraphing some route breaks as well, and then he doesn't necessarily threaten any of the defenders, right? So when it comes to guarding him, the mindset of the DB is already, I just need to make sure I'm in the hip pocket, and at that point, I should be able to adjust to most things as long as they aren't trying to high point a ball against me. And so there's a world where that works in his favor just as well as it ends up being a problem for him. Again, as a guy that right now doesn't consistently create open windows like you'd expect. And then he wasn't generally part of the run blocking core, which is kind of a theme so far. We talked about this with Matthew Golden. This is the same issue with McMillan. You would expect that he can ragdoll some of these guys or at least knock them out of the phase of being able to make a play on the ball. But more often than not, he just wasn't trusted to be that guy to even line up out there on the field and participate in that. So, I don't know how we'll go about necessarily addressing that and getting it resolved right, but this is a guy that has all of the tools to be successful. He could be a top-tier option in some offenses right out of the gate. If you already feel like you have a wide receiver one, this is your guy where you can be a little bit excited about the opportunity to play the mismatch game and not necessarily just force him into being a pure number 2 boundary type receiver. So we'll see how it plays out. Maybe there's some hidden interest here in terms of the Jets and all of the bit of leaks that we're seeing, right? When it comes to Tyler Warren and some of these other guys, maybe they're looking to have Tet fly under the radar, and then he ends up being the pick at number 7. But let me know what you guys think. Are you selecting him? Is this more of a trade down candidate for you as well? Or is he completely off your radar? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.